Hi, everybody. A lot of people, well, no, I don't know about a lot of people, but some people go to school overseas. And I was schooled in Europe, sort of. When I was 17, I was a member of the Ohio Youth Chorale, a choir of 55 teenagers from all over the state. And I had the privilege of going to Europe and singing in some of the most beautiful cathedrals in the world. One of the lessons that I learned over there was the importance of knowing the native language when you travel. One such lesson was learned in Luxembourg when, without a chaperone, a friend of mine and I went into a restaurant. We didn't recognize anything on the menu, and so we asked the server, who knew no English, to describe the food to us. He used gestures. His voice grew louder as he tried very slowly to pronounce to us in his language what the food was, as if the volume and pronunciation was going to help us understand. At some point, we just said yes to whatever he was describing. So the food arrived about an hour later, and we thought maybe he'd had to go out and buy a cow or something. When we saw the food, it didn't look very much like what we thought we might have ordered. And the Cokes, if you've ever been there, were warm and thick. So anyway, when we got ready to leave, we were counting out our francs and we thought we had paid what we were supposed to pay. But he grabbed more money out of our hands, and we figured it's because of all the trouble he went to buying the cow. But by the time we left, we were uncertain of what we had eaten and uncertain of what we had paid for it. Unfortunately, one of the lessons I learned in language is that, sadly, you can offend people. We did manage to offend Anne Frank's father. As a choir, the composer, Jan Bender, had written a song for our choir, using the text of one of Anne Frank's letters. It had been written in both Dutch and English, and Anne Frank's father was supposed to attend the premiere performance of this song, but refused to come when at the last minute he learned we were not singing it in Dutch. Another stop that we made on that trip was at the Rijksmuseum, also in Amsterdam. This Rijksmuseum is enormous. It was every bit as big as some of the castles and palaces that we saw on this trip. So my friend and I are, again, without chaperones, free to wander around and offending the natives. We were walking up and down these very long hallways looking at art, Rembrandt, other people, and we saw to our right a hallway that was long. It was highlighted by a sign with a Dutch word and some arrows. So we figured it was leading us to the next display room, and we thought we headed down that hall. It was curious that there was nobody else in this hallway. At the very end of it, it circled into a marble staircase, and we went down. Chatting as girls will do, we didn't look up from our conversation until we were in the middle of a large white room. The first thing I noticed was that we were the only females in the room. The very next second, there were some red-faced, gesturing men yelling at us in words that we didn't know. My friend realized our situation before I did, and as I was being dragged to the door, I realized we were actually surrounded by men, most of whom were facing the wall. It just so happens that not knowing the native language doesn't always have to end in disaster. In Basel, Switzerland, we had been told to meet at a certain place, a cathedral, where we were to perform later that evening. Street signs in Swiss French and Swiss German, along with directions in broken English, had all combined to land us alone in front of a church that was very old and very large and apparently closed. As we stood there wondering what we were supposed to do next, we were very relieved to see some other members of the choir coming. And then more, and then more, and then more. Soon there were 40 of us, teenagers from Ohio, standing in the freezing rain in front of the Gothic St. Elizabeth Church, putting on an impromptu concert. And the Swiss people who gathered, mixed with tourists from around the world, were smiling despite the weather. And I propose to you that once again, the universal language of music crossed all barriers. Thank you. That's so scary.